Hello everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Info Nuggets with Amy. I am your host, Amy. I am the Assistant Branch Manager at the main library, and today we're going to be talking about Ancestry Library Edition. Now, we have been able to access this over the past 2 months from your home computers because Ancestry.com has graciously allowed library patrons to access it from home, where normally you can only access it within library walls. This will be ending most likely June 1st, where we will have to go back to being able to access the free access to Ancestry Library Edition from the library. So now's the time to take advantage of it, especially looking at some of the international records, which is what we'll be concentrating on today. I know a lot of people who will subscribe to their own personal Ancestry.com subscriptions, just the basic package. They don't have access to the World Explorer records, which is available in the library's access. So several people that I know they've gone ahead and subscribed to the basic one that they can access from home, but then they'll come to the library whenever they want the international records. So we're going to be focusing on that stuff today. International records are near and dear to my heart. I have immigrants in my own family, and it's always exciting to find out more about where they came from. So we are going to go ahead and get started with some things that are specific to this time period that we're in right now. Let me go ahead and get this screen up, and we're going to go over really quickly some specific things that are happening with the library. First thing I want to show you guys on our website here at sjcpls.org, we do have an event schedule, upcoming events. If you double click on that, it will show you all of the upcoming Facebook Live events or online events that we have coming up. So you can go through the calendar. We already have a lot of things booked for June. You can click the arrow right next to that, and it will show you everything that's coming up during the summer. Once you find an event that looks really interesting, I'm trying to find one of mine on here. Let's see here. Gosh, we've got more stuff going on than I thought. Here we go. So once you find an event that looks interesting, if you click on the title, you'll see the full description, and there'll be a link to the Facebook page if you want to go ahead and add it into your calendar so you don't forget. I do also want to make you aware, if you haven't heard yet, library branches are open for limited hours and limited services. Up here at the top of the screen on that yellow bar, if you click on Read More over on the right, it will give you some more information about how you can access the various branches. Basically, it's Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. You can go in there and pick stuff up. You can use computers up to an hour. So more information is there. I do also want to point out our virtual Ask a Librarian service that we have. Underneath eLibrary, one of the options, maybe it was under Explore. Okay, so actually under Explore, if you click on Ask a Librarian, it will bring you to a librarian chat service. So if you ever have any questions during your research and you need some assistance, you can either text, chat, or email us, and a librarian will get back to you. One more thing to quickly point out. We are getting ready for our annual summer reading program. It's going to be very different this year because of the various COVID circumstances that we find ourselves in. But on our homepage, if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see the coming soon for the summer reading program. You can click on that to get some more information. The format of this particular presentation today is I'll be answering questions at the end because I very easily go off on tangents, and we're trying to keep this to about 30 to 40 minutes. So all questions will be answered at the end, but feel free to go ahead and add them in the chat box as we go along, and we'll catch up. This is being recorded for YouTube. Yes, we do have a YouTube station. It's SJC Library Vid. All of the videos that we've been doing are archived on here. And don't forget to click on subscribe so you know when new content is added. So let's go and officially, whoops, Okay, welcome. We're going to be taking a look at Ancestry Library Edition. We're going to be looking specifically today at some of the international records that you can find and how you can do research to get to the point where you know what to actually start to look for. So I'm Amy. I'm the Assistant Branch Manager at the main library, and I love doing immigrant research. My maternal grandparents, my Oma and Opa, they both immigrated over in the 1950s. And it's an inspiring story for both of them, but finding those people that, made the jump, that decided that they wanted to go out and better their lives, their stories are always inspiring. So I love doing immigrant research. I am interested also in what different areas you're researching. So if you want to leave a comment in our chat section, like what countries are you interested in learning more about? Or where have you found some immigrants? So let's go ahead and okay, so starting off on our website, let me show you how to get to Ancestry Library Edition. You're starting off at the sjcpls.org and then going over to where it says eLibrary. You hover over that and then click on Databases. And we have a lot of databases on this page, and they're all in alphabetical order. So Ancestry Library Edition is right at the top of the list. You will go ahead and click on that, and you will get this screen. This is where it wants you to go ahead and type in your library card number. You will type it in with no spaces, and then go ahead and click where it says Login. And it should bring you to this. So before we get started looking at some of the records that you can find with an Ancestry Library Edition, we need to do some background work to get us to this point. As with any genealogy research, you want to start at the present and work yourself backwards. You don't want to jump straight in saying, your great uncle Matthew or your great-great-grandfather Matthew was from Ireland like in the 1800s. You don't just jump in to that. You have to get to that point from here to there. You need to fully explore their life in the United States before you can go ahead and start researching what their life was like somewhere else. There are so many clues that can be found in all sorts of different documents that will help you during your research. That'll make life so much easier. So as you are doing your family history research, there are a couple of tools that you can use so you can start to get a good idea of what you should be looking for. Right here, FamilySearch, they have a really great wiki on tracing immigrants, tracing your immigrant ancestors, that kind of guide you through step by step some of the things that you want to look for, like different search strategies. While the content on here is specific to FamilySearch, which does have free resources for you to access from home, the methodology is very similar to what you would use on Ancestry Library Edition. Biggest step, identifying what you know about the immigrant. This is where you are talking to family members and getting more information that you might not be aware of before you actually start doing your research. Some forms that I highly recommend. We have an Ancestral Village worksheet. Again, this kind of helps you figure out what it is that you need to know. Similarly, we have a passenger list search worksheet, which kind of guides you in the direction of what documents should you be looking for, and it's an easy place to track all of the information that you're finding so you have it in one spot. Another resource that I love is from Ancestry.com. It's finding your immigrant ancestors at Ancestry.com. This is about a 7-page PDF, and it guides you through step by step, again, different things that you should be looking for. So, as you do your research here in the United States, you will start to find some of your ancestors who are giving you your hints that they're not from around here, that they are actually from somewhere else. And some of the best places to find that out is in the United States censuses. The different censuses tracked different information depending on what decade you were looking at. For instance, right here on the screen, I've got the 1900 census for one of my ancestors. 1900 was a great year for getting to know some immigration information, because that was one of the questions that they asked. They asked about citizenship. Similarly, 1910, 1920, 1930 census, they all ask various information about naturalization. So check those censuses thoroughly, like read every line to see if they give you any clues about your ancestor. So, for example, my ancestor here, Martin, it indicates that Martin was born in Denmark, as was his father and his mother. Furthermore, in the citizenship column, it tells me exactly what year he immigrated to the United States, 1866. Also, it tells me naturalization status, NA, not available. Immigration does not equate naturalization. Both of them have very different document types, so you should be looking for documents for each of these categories. In this case, since I know Martin wasn't naturalized, I won't be spending that much time looking for that, but I can be spending more time looking for immigration records. Another place where you can get some very good clues, and let me jump to one of the search screens here. When you're doing your basic search, oh wait, there we go. When you're doing your basic search and you're looking up somebody and you're let's see here, so I'm going to use my grandmother as an example. Let's see here. So she comes up right away, her passenger list from when she came over in 1952. When I click on that, it gives the indexing, and if you've watched any of these episodes that I've done before, you know how much I distrust indexing. So always click on the actual record itself. You want to view it yourself. And it takes me, let's see here. So this is the passenger manifest on the ship that she came over, the General Blatchford, in 1952. Here she is. It gives me her surname, her first name, her age, gender, marital status, nationality, and some immigration numbers specific to her. This is her luggage number. This is if she's paid her fees or not, and this is a little mystery thing that I'm going to get to later. So we have some really good information right here already. At the very top of the manifest, whoops, it was the Harry Taylor. At the time it was the Harry Taylor. Ship names do change over time as well. But it tells me she arrived in New York, New York, January 31st, 1952. It tells me which port she came from, Bremerhaven. They left on January 21st, 1952, so it took them 10 days to get across. And in this case, and this is something that you might find in your own research, class, right here, DP. So a DP in 1952 indicates displaced person. She was a refugee at the time. So it's very important that you learn the historical context of what was going on in the world when your ancestor immigrated, because you are going to come across some of the different initials or nomenclature of things that are very specific to that time period, and it really helps you out if you have a good understanding of what was going on to help explain things. So right here, the displaced person, for me, indicates that there's going to be a bunch more records that I can find on her, because that was a specific class of person. There was a lot of paperwork for refugees, and it took them a long time to be able to come over to the United States. Immigration was not quick in during that time period. And this is something where I still kind of beat myself up over it. The first time I saw this record was probably maybe about 10 or 11 years ago. She was one of the first people that I looked up on Ancestry.com. And I was so excited, just to find her name and the age and the date. And I was like, okay, that's it. And I didn't look at the record for like another probably 3 years. And as I was going through my files one day, my eyes caught over here at this NCWC. And this is what taught me, where you have to find out what every single column means whenever you find any kind of form. In this particular case, and shout out to Ann Staley, a genealogist up in Jacksonville who had helped me out with this, NCWC was the National Catholic Welfare Charity, an organization that helped refugees that were fleeing Europe and coming over to the United States. And so that got me curious, because most agencies, places that create a lot of paperwork, what happens to that paperwork? Being a government employee myself, I know that we are required to hang on to some paperwork for a long time. So it occurred to me that it's quite possible that they too were required to hold on to the paperwork that they collected during that time period. And in fact, they were. So I was able to track down the present holder of the archive of this agency to a museum in New York. It's the Center for Migration Studies, so not just a museum, but they do a lot of research about immigration, and they have a massive archive that includes the records of the National Catholic Welfare Conference's Bureau of Immigration through 1975. So I went ahead and emailed them, and sure enough, they responded back. They had records specific to my grandmother and her parents when they immigrated over. And I hit the mother lode, to be completely honest. Most people don't get this lucky. They were able to send me copies of their emigration records, not just immigration when you're coming into a country, but emigration when you're leaving one. So this was the paperwork that was required for them to leave. There's a couple of hilarious things in here. For instance, they had to indicate their knowledge of English. My great-grandfather said, yeah, his English is good. That cracks me up every time I see it. They had records from a local Catholic parish. They had packing slips for their luggage, because what they also had was a letter from my great-grandfather telling them that he's waiting every day for his big baggage to arrive and that he believes they forgot to send it. This is stuff that I would have never found if I hadn't been paying very close attention to these little initials right here. So follow every single clue you find. You never know where your ancestors are going to pop up. What's also useful is to know what forms were being used at the time of your ancestors' immigration. In this guide from Ancestry.com, they kind of break it up, Life in America, under the different key dates, and they tell you what was required at the time. So if they were immigrating sometime between 1820 and 1893, they had passenger lists. So you know what kind of documentation that you should be looking for when you're doing your research. Something else that's pretty important as you're researching, especially in the example of my grandmother, is you need to know your maps. You need to know your locations. One of the features in here under search is you can explore by location. Boundaries change all the time. My grandmother was from a part in formerly Prussia where, if you sneezed hard enough, the borders would change. So it's important to know what the nationality is today might not be what the nationality was at the time. So she was born in Gdansk, near here. Culturally at the time, German. Today it's part of Poland. So if I wanted to go and visit where my German forefathers came from, I would be going to Poland. And the records and different archives that I would need to access, not only do I need to know a little bit of German to read the records, I also need to know a little bit of Polish to fill out the forms to request particular records. So when you're doing international research, you do need to start keeping a list of key terminology. For instance, I know a lot of different German phrases for vital records now, like I can recognize the words for marriage or death or baptism. It's very helpful to just know those key terms so you can kind of read what it is that you're looking at. It's also helpful to have a grandparent who speaks the language. My Oma right now is working on translating a record that I found over the weekend. So that's also very helpful. What also works not as well is Google Translate. It'll give you a gist of what you're looking for. It won't be complete, but it will steer you in the right direction. There are also a bunch of Facebook groups for genealogists that are particular to different regions, and time again I've seen people where they say, can you help me with this record? I don't know what this means, and some kind soul will come in and help them translate it. And also different friends. This past weekend also, a friend of mine, she's a Danish librarian, I was having some difficulties with a Danish record, and she posted it on her Facebook page so her Danish friends could also help translate and sort of put a context to the historical record that I found. So if you're doing international research, you very likely are going to be coming across some language barriers, and if you don't know how to speak it, you need to figure out some different ways of being able to translate the record, because as we saw with the passenger manifest, you want to know every single little piece of information that's on there. A couple of little initials might mean something very important that you would want to follow up on. So with the border changes that sometimes happen with different countries, names of cities will change as well, or names of the different counties or the parishes or the precincts. Those will change as well. So it's helpful to do research on particular areas. I'm very fortunate in that somebody has already put together from that area where my grandmother is from and her father, where it has the German name for a location, but it also gives it the Polish name, and it even gives me coordinates on a map. If that's something that has happened in your own past, do some other research on the internet, try to find other genealogy groups who are focusing on that particular area, and hopefully you'll be able to find something like this where it has both names for a region. So again, back to doing some of your United States research, you want to look at every single record that you can possibly find about your particular ancestor, because you want to collect all of these little tiny clues before you can even really make the jump across the pond, as they like to say. And not only your ancestor, you want to also explore records of their siblings, their parents, their spouse, anyone who might have potentially immigrated with them. You want to thoroughly research as well. You never know when your ancestors are going to pop up in really strange places. One of the examples I like to give about, researching everybody in the tree is I have a Civil War Union soldier. In my past, I've been trying to find information on his mother. I'm convinced that it's possible she might be a vampire because I've never been able to find her death record. It's one of my big brick walls. But in my research, not on my direct line Union soldier ancestor, but rather on his sister-in-law, okay, that was the sister of his brother, under her married name, when she was filling out Civil War widow's pension files, which required a lot of documentation, within a very thick packet, again this was under her married name, I found a affidavit from this soldier's mother that I've been trying to hunt down, where she's certified that, she was in the room when this woman gave birth to the kids, so these are definitely the sons of the soldier and the widow. And I would have never found her because it was under a completely different name. So you want to thoroughly research the records of anyone who is possibly related to the ancestor that you're looking for. Especially with immigrants, because frequently they will travel together. In the case of my great-grandfather, he came over, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, two of their kids, and then two more came at a later date. But they will frequently come together all at once. Or sometimes it's one at a time. Sometimes one person goes over, kind of establishes themselves, and then they bring over a brother or sister or another family member. But it is useful to research everybody in the family, because if you can't find something for your ancestor, you might find the immigration records for your ancestor's sister, which might give you some further clues as to where it is that they came from. One thing to also keep in mind is not everybody came through Ellis Island. There were a gazillion ports, a lot more than just Ellis Island, so you want to keep your research a little broad. Not everybody came through the proverbial, Statue of Liberty. Also, names were not changed at Ellis Island. That's a popular myth. That didn't happen. People might have changed their own names for different purposes at different times, but it wasn't something that automatically happened at Ellis Island. That said, you want to be very broad with spellings of names when you're doing searches, because sometimes it's hard to translate things that you're hearing when you're typing things out. For instance, my ancestor here, whenever I'm doing research, there's about 3 or 4 different spellings that I have to use. Initially, it was Ackerman, Aakkermann, and over time it kind of became this, but I have to do a bunch of different variations when doing the spelling. And when you're doing your searches, let me find this, you do have an option in your search filters. Like, it defaults to exact, sounds like, and similar. If you're still not getting any results when you're doing some searches, you can bring it back to broad, and it will try to find any name that's vaguely similar to the one that you have entered. On the other hand, you can also make it more specific, exact and similar, and exact, but that tends to leave out and exclude a lot of records that might have some bearing to your search. So I would advise don't use exact. The spelling that you think is correct may not be correct, and even if it is correct, the person who wrote it down may have completely butchered the name when they were writing it down. So be very careful when you're using these broad and exact filters. So when you're also looking at different vital records for other locations, like you've exhausted the United States immigration portion of your research and you're ready to go ahead and jump and start looking in different areas, you can go ahead and focus in on a very specific region. So under the main search page, when you scroll down a little bit, you get your Explore by Location map, where you can click on USA, Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, South America, and you can zoom in on a particular region. In my case, I was very lucky that I already knew the family history on my grandmother's side, so I knew geographically where it was I should be looking for. But you can also click on a different country to get those specific types of records. So if you were looking for England and you click on that, it will bring up the different record types that they have available for you to search, and in this case 263 things pertaining to England. So you can jump straight to a particular resource rather than do a very, very broad search of every single record within Ancestry Library Edition. You can focus in like on a particular census that you're looking for maybe, or a particular region. One of the things that I like to do when I am doing that kind of research in another country is to keep other records of the family available. So, for example, what I have here is the immigration information for, let's see here, this family here was John and Mary Ireland. This is the passenger manifest when they came over. I think it was in 1850. And it has a list of their kids, like Hannah, John, Anne, Fanny, Mabel, etc. So I have a list of the husband, the wife, and the different children. And then later on, when I was looking at the census information back in England, when I found somebody who matched up, John and Mary Ireland, living in England, I was able to check the kids to make sure that this was in fact the same family and not just some other John and Mary who had the same last name. So it is extremely useful to know the name of every single family member who is within that family unit, because you can sometimes compare records to determine if these are in fact the same people that you're looking for. So it was here in the 1841 census where it listed the other family members, their children, where I could verify, especially if they're listing the how old they are, to compare it to the 1850 immigration information to verify that was the same family. Question everything that you thought you knew about your family. You might have been told one thing growing up only to discover that wasn't entirely true, so don't take what you learned growing up as fact. For example, when I first started doing my genealogy, I started off with myself, was working backwards, and I was doing a very rudimentary tree, and I was talking it over with my grandmother, just to make sure that everything was right. I was like, okay, my great-grandmother, her maiden name, it was Edith Park. And then I was, trying to make sure I had the dates right. And then my grandmother pipes up and says, oh no, by the way, they changed their name. They used to be Baroneski. So double check everything because stuff like that happens. And you don't want to waste your time doing research on one family surname when it turns out that was never the right one to begin with. It can get very frustrating, and it's very important just to keep an open mind where if you're finding some records that don't quite match up to what you were told, it's entirely possible that what you were told was wrong. This happens. And this is pretty much what I have, the majority of the different types of things to look for and different things to be aware of. There's no one way to do anything when it comes to immigration research or international records. And again, like I've mentioned in previous genealogy shows that I've done, is that with Ancestry.com or any of those digital resources that you're using, it's not a multiple choice sort of situation when you have results. Like if I'm doing a search for somebody and only 10 things come up, it's not like I have to find, it's not a guarantee that my ancestor is one of those 10. It's entirely possible that the records pertaining to that ancestor haven't been digitized yet. So don't try to force your ancestor into the list of results that are coming up. You need to get definitely more than one record for a particular life event to verify that this in fact is your ancestor. There's a lot of archives out there that haven't even been digitized yet, so your ancestor, they just might not be on the internet. I mean, that happens. Ancestry.com doesn't have every single record out there, which is why it's good to use a couple of other resources as well. Right now, since you can access it from home, you do want to focus your attention on the Ancestry Library Edition. But once June 1st hits, another really good website for different international records was FamilySearch. It's free. You do have to create a free account with them in order to access some of the materials. But it's free, and you can access this one from home. And they do have different censuses, vital records, all sorts of good information from other countries that are very useful in your research. They have stuff on their website that Ancestry.com doesn't have. There's a little bit of overlap sometimes, but for the most part, you want to cast a very wide net when you're doing genealogy research, especially international genealogy research. And sometimes you will end up having to write away to different organizations like the migration study, the Center for Migration Studies, as I did to find some records. They are a great place to know about. They have very specific types of collections that won't aid everyone who's doing international research. But take a look at their website. They might have some things pertaining to your people. And it definitely might be worth writing away and asking. So, one of the things that I do want to leave you with before we close this and before we start taking a look at questions is this is one of my most favorite pictures that I have a copy of. This is a picture of my grandmother in her naturalization ceremony. That's her holding up her hand and taking the oath. And it's such an important moment that was captured. And I mean, this is a very important moment for the entire family. So I love this picture, and we are going to go ahead and take a look and see if we have any questions. Let me just put a different screen up here while I jump over and check the Facebook. And I always have problems. Oh, here we go. So as far as I can tell, we don't have any questions, but we do have a hello from one of my second cousins, Caroline. It was her mom also that immigrated with my grandmother. So I'm happy to see you, Miss Caroline. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So I will go ahead and jump to my general thank you for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun. This will be archived on YouTube probably within a week. Don't forget to like and subscribe, especially on the YouTube, so you can get notified when different content becomes available. And Monday through Friday, Adult Services staff are here on Facebook with our virtual programs, 3 o'clock, that's our time slot. Next Friday, I will be here doing something on our Demographics Now database, which is great for small businesses who are working on marketing, especially during these difficult times where you're trying to get people back into your establishments. Demographics Now will be able to help you figure out some more information about your clientele. But the next genealogy-related topic that I'm doing, it's going to be on June 26th. I'm going to be talking about the different free online resources that are available to you where they have digitized family history books, which are a treasure trove of clues, not necessarily facts, but clues for you to follow up on and do additional research. So I want to thank you all for joining me here today. I love these things. They are a great bunch of fun. If you ever have any questions about how to use Ancestry Library Edition, feel free to contact your library and we'll do what we can to help you. And especially a big thanks to Miss Margaret, who has been monitoring from afar during this presentation and who has been helping out with the chat screens. So thank you, Margaret. I appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic weekend. And